Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for coming. Today, for the first time, due to the outstanding work of the Suffolk County Homicide Unit of the Suffolk County Police Department, the FBI, working in collaboration with my office and a whole host of other law enforcement partners, we're able to announce for the first time that we've solved the 42-year-old homicide case of Eve Wilkowitz. And we've identified the perpetrator of that crime as being a Herbert Rice, who's deceased. And so what I want to do, if I can, is first and foremost, I want to thank a number of people who I think were instrumental in bringing us to this day. And then I want to briefly take everyone through the facts of the case to show the steps which were taken, which got us to this place. And I'm going to try to do that as briefly as I'm capable of. So with regard, and then I'll turn it over for some brief questions with regard to the facts, if anyone has any. So with regard to the thanks, first and foremost, I would like to thank the Suffolk County Homicide Bureau, both past and present. This was a study in persistence, in determination, and to continuing to work the case no matter what. And there's so many people we could talk about. We could talk about the original case detective, Anthony Palumbo Sr. We could talk about Detective Patrick Palladino, who are both retired. We could talk about Jeff Bolteri, who's still with the office, all of them, as well as all of the Suffolk County homicide detectives, the men and women of that unit worked persistently to bring us to this place. And so I thank them for that. Thank you, Jeff. I also, as always, want to thank Commissioner Rodney Harrison for his assistance. Commissioner Harrison and I, we've both briefly assumed our positions, and during that time, we both individually and collectively, we talked about the importance of working these unsolved homicide cases. And we've evinced a commitment to that. And I think that this case shows or illustrates that commitment. So I'm very pleased not only for this case, but for what lies in the future. And I would like to thank Commissioner Harrison for his support and his excellent work as always. I want to thank the FBI, specifically Special Agent Lori Giordano and her supervisor, Don Ansbacher, for their work with the genealogic DNA analysis in this case. Again, this is a case about partnership, and their work was instrumental in coming to this result. So thank you all very much for that. I want to thank members of my own DA staff, specifically ADA Carrie Ann Kelly of the Major Crime Bureau and Glenn Green of our Appeals Bureau, as well as my Chief Assistant, Alan Bodie, for coming together and coming up with a quick and innovative way to obtain the DNA sample from the subject that conclusively led to the finding in this case. There are so many other people, the Suffolk County Crime Lab. We have Kerry Anito, who performed the DNA analysis on the state level. Outstanding job. Thank you, Kerry. Odette Hall of the Medical Examiner's Office. Again, unbelievable work, quick work, all to try to come to this result. I also want to thank cooperating members of the subject, Mr. Rice's family. They came in and they assisted us, and they were very generous in helping us to come reach this conclusion today. And I know law enforcement is very thankful for that, but the Wilkowitz family is very thankful for that as well. We wanted to make sure that we thanked them. And I left the Wilkowitz family last, but certainly not least. We in law enforcement are under no illusion when we do something like this. We work hard, we work together, we're persistent, and we hope that in the end we could bring a small measure of closure to the victim's family. And we hope fervently that we did that in this case. And that's always rewarding, but it's especially rewarding when you do it in a case as this, where you have Eve Wilkowitz's sister, Irene, who was involved in this case from the very beginning. She was persistent, she was steadfast, she was dignified, and she always advocated for her sister and for the case. And in so doing that, not only did she honor her sister and her family, but she honored all the families and all the victims of violence. And for that, we thank you. Thank you so much, Irene. So briefly, I just want to conclude with the timeline in this case, and I think it's a fairly straightforward timeline. March 22nd, 1980, Eve Wilkowitz took a 12:39 train from Penn Station to her apartment in Bayshore. At the time, Eve was working as a secretary, and she was taking the train back to her house in Bayshore, where she had an apartment on Fifth Avenue. She would walk from the train to her apartment, which was in short walking distance. Eve got on Eve got on the train, but unfortunately she never reached her house. 3 days later, on March 25th, 1980, her body was found on 26 Center Avenue in Bayshore, which was between the train station and her house on Fifth Avenue. At that time, the investigation revealed that she had been sexually assaulted. She had been strangled. There was a rape kit analysis performed, and due to the technology at the time, no donor profile, no DNA profile was able to be obtained. And although the Suffolk County homicide detectives worked fervently on the case, it didn't proceed. There was no suspect identified. And that's where the case remained until about May 12th of 2000. And at that time, DNA analysis had progressed. We had something called STR DNA analysis, which allowed to analyze a much smaller piece of DNA. So the Suffolk County homicide resubmitted the swabs taken at the time of the murder for DNA analysis, and this time they did come up with a result that could be used for comparison purposes, and it was a mixture. It was a mixture of male and female. Not surprisingly, the female donor was Eve Wilkowitz, and the male donor was unknown. So that profile was put in the CODIS database, and there were no results. There were no matches. And that's where we stood until about beginning in 2019. Once again, the Suffolk County homicide, they made application for the New York State Department of DCJS to run genealogic male DNA testing of the sample, so they could see that maybe somewhere in the system there was a male relative of the perpetrator of the crime who had been caught up in the system. Unfortunately, that result was negative. But they didn't stop there. They enlisted the aid of Lori Giordano and the FBI, and they did genealogic comparisons on publicly available databases. That was in, I think, about early 2020. Fortunately, that bore fruit. They were able to get a profile of a relative of Mr. Rice, and from there, they developed Mr. Rice as a suspect in the case. Now, with regard to the suspect, Mr. Rice, he died in 1991, about 11 years after the murder. He died of natural causes. He was 40 years of age at the time he died. But a investigation revealed that at around the time of the murder, he lived at 26, or he stayed at 26 Center Avenue in Bayshore, which was about 4 or 5 houses away from where Eve's body was recovered, and that he was there at the time of the murder. The investigation then turned to a close male relative of the subject, who agreed to do a STR DNA analysis, and that showed that that individual was related to the perpetrator of the crime. From there, in March 10th of this year, our office obtained a search warrant to exhume the body of Mr. Rice, and then on March 23rd, again, the Suffolk County Crime Lab obtained DNA, a DNA sample from Mr. Rice. That DNA sample was compared to the DNA sample that was obtained at the time of the crime, and it was a match. And it was that DNA was obtained from the swab, the rape kit swab, and was sperm that was left at the scene. So that's how we came to this place, and we were able to do it through the collaboration of a lot of really dogged investigators working collaboratively with the assistance of an unbelievable family. So again, we realize that it's just a small measure of closure that we can give to the family, but we're pleased to be able to do it. Does anyone have any questions with regard to the facts?
Yes, did he have a criminal record? Because back when this happened, DNA, I don't believe, was submitted into the system.
Yeah, well, he had a number of arrests. I believe he had 3, a minor, nothing violent. He had a criminal trespass. He had, I believe, a grand larceny and a petty larceny convictions. Did a small amount of jail time. I don't believe at the time that they were eligible for DNA.
Would it be accurate to say the relative who provided you with the sample is his son?
We're respecting the privacy of that individual. We can say that the Rice family was cooperative, and had nothing to do with the incident, and we're certainly grateful for that cooperation.
Is there any shelf life on DNA? It's amazing that it could survive for 40 years, the sample from the crime. Is there a time at which it will no longer be?
Well, there's a whole bunch of factors, like how it's stored, the environment in which it's stored, how it's stored, the vessel in which it's kept. Obviously, if you leave DNA out, and it gets exposed to sunlight and rain, and it's going to be less. But you could get DNA. They get DNA from dinosaur fossils. So, in certain instances, you can get it.
Did he keep her for 3 days?
We have no indication one way or the other of that. We don't think so. I know if anyone has any other questions, I'll be happy to ask them on the side. I just want to continue, and I want to ask Commissioner Harrison to come up and say a few words.
Thanks, Ray, and I want to apologize, ladies and gentlemen. The truth of the matter is, my predecessor, Geraldine Hart, should be standing here today. She had a major role in pushing the investigation forward regarding the genetic genealogy. So I think it's important that I acknowledge her role in this investigation. So I'd like to thank our partners in the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, our FBI, medical examiner, and I want to make sure I acknowledge the great work by the men and women of the Suffolk County Police Department under the leadership of Kevin Breyer, standing over here to my right, and behind me, Detective Bottari, that did a phenomenal job in this investigation. I also want to thank Irene. God bless you. Who never lost faith in our investigators' dedication in solving your sister's murder. These types of investigations are never easy, but the relentless work and the partnership helped us bring closure to the Wilkowitz family. I pray that nobody else has to go through this type of ordeal, but I'm putting the criminals on notice at this time. If you choose to victimize a resident of this county, I have the best investigators in the country that would track you down and hold you accountable.